Good evening. This is the July 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Newcastle Planning Commission. It is 6:01. We'll call the meeting to order, and would you please join me for a flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Director Fitzgibbons, would you like to call the roll?
I would. Okay. We have Commissioner Keck.
Here.
Commissioner Lowe, not here yet. Commissioner Van Etta.
Present?
Commissioner Blocker.
Here.
Vice Chair Troutman.
Yes, ma'am, here.
And Chair Gatzig.
Here. First item is the approval of the agenda. You have that before you. Are there any changes that you'd like to request? Okay, seeing none, we will consider that approved. Next up is the approval of the minutes of the June 25th meeting, which you also have had. Are there any modifications to that? Yes, sir. Vice Chair.
I was speaking with Commissioner Lowe earlier in the day. I don't have the minutes with me, but she noted that we took a vote last time on changing the expiration dates of the two commissions. And you recorded that as a 6-0 vote, I believe, and Commissioner Lowe hadn't showed up yet. So I don't know if you need to amend the minutes or not, but I thought I'd make you aware of that.
Well, we'll amend the minutes.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other changes, we'll consider the minutes approved. That brings us to the public comment period. And we have many in the audience tonight, so I think we'll definitely be having some public comment. Those of you who would like to speak, you have 3 minutes. You'll come to the podium and press a button so that lights up, so we'll pick up your voice. There's a timer that should be visible somewhere. Your time is 3 minutes. As you get close to that 3 minutes, if you still have much to say, we will gently remind you to wrap it up. So that the next person can speak. There's a sign-up sheet for those who wish to speak. So we'll go in that order, but if you haven't signed up and you are inspired that you would like to, feel free to do so at the end of the last person that has signed up. The process that we follow here, let me just say a little bit about the Planning Commission because I see a lot of new faces. The Planning Commission makes recommendations to the City Council on any change in law, city law, that affects land use. So this is the first step in that process. We study the issue, we learn from our staff, we learn from the people who come and speak to us or write to us, and then we vote and make a recommendation to the City Council. Our recommendation that makes no change in the law. Nothing happens until it goes to the City Council. So, and tonight we might not take any action to make a recommendation, but suppose we do, there will likely be another meeting where we would have a formal public hearing on that action, and that would be another opportunity for people who have an interest in this to express themselves. And then we would send that recommendation to City Council, and then there would be another whole round of input to it. So that's kind of how it rolls out. So this particular, these two particular items before us, the critical areas ordinance and the zoning map, it's probably going to be a 3 or 4 month process perhaps before there's anything that actually changes the city's law on it. With that, let's get that playing.
Okay.
Okay, first up tonight is Jan Drange. Pardon me if I have mispronounced your name.
There's a gray button.
A gray button.
When the red light's on, then you're live.
Love it. Anyways, my name is Jan Drange, and I was raised on Lake Boren, as you might know, or maybe there aren't a whole lot of gray hairs here. The Drange family has had a presence on Lake Boren since the 1930s, when my grandparents and father, Frank Drange, who you probably do know, spent summers on the cabins on the north side of the lake. They've been good stewards. The Drange family and the Pattersons have both been good stewards of Lake Boren for over 70 years. They've measured the water level, we've checked on the dam, the Fort Meade Creek. We cleared, actually, half the land all the way along Coal Creek Parkway, which is now Coal Creek Parkway, and I think you guys own it rather than all the houses. Living close to the lake gave us the opportunity to observe nature, watching the baby ducks in the spring, watching the beaver dive, the ospreys and the eagles fighting over the fish, listening to the red-winged blackbirds. We all loved living on this lake, enjoying the water, swimming, fishing, kayaking, and it was a delight to be able to have a nice house with a view of the water that we could entertain friends with and family for so many years. As one of the last, if not the last, buildable lot on the lake, it almost seems punitive to impose a 150-foot setback on top of the buffer area, and that would give us a wonderful view of the neighbors' roofs, the neighbors' houses, and make it so we would need to have binoculars to see the baby ducks. The lot was developed by my father and my grandfather. It's a family legacy, if you will. I'm actually too old to tackle building a house here, but I hope the Planning Commission will see fit to leave the setback at 110 feet so that any new owners will have the opportunity to build a new house and enjoy the lake and see the lake, as everyone who has already built on there, all but one house, and lived on the lake has done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Deborah Huizinga. And I forgot to mention, but Ms. Drange did a good job of not only telling us who she is, but where she lives, which we'd like you to say for the record.
Okay, hi, good evening, Commission. My name is Deb Huizinga. I live in a development called Pleasant Cove. The address is 8009 118th Court Southeast in Newcastle. I'm calling in regards to, I'm talking in regards to a letter received July 2nd, stating that my parcel appears to be within 50 feet of a wetland, which it is a wetland, not a stream. Where they said that they're reaching out to us because the buffer distance is going to be changing between 25 to 50 feet, depending on what it is. It is also stated in the letter that the Planning Commission is also considering other changes to the Critical Areas Ordinance, which may be of interest of you. The purpose of my comment is first to understand more clarity on what this means. I'm very confused by the language of the letter. My home currently resides around 50 feet buffer to that wetland area. So we look at a lovely green belt, which we have a fence around. In my interpretation, which again, I'm super unclear in this letter and hoping to seek that clarity here, is to understand what the considerations are. Because my fence is about 10 feet in from the district, from the line of our parcel. Is it that you need some additional footage on top of where the land is, or are you going all the way in 25 to 50 feet? So I would state that if you came in 50 feet, you'd be going into my home, like into my home. If it was 25 feet, you'd be taking up all the way into my, my little deck that I have. So I humbly ask that you consider grandfathering other homes. There are 3 others within our street that also received these letters to provide the fact that we can keep our backyards the way that they should be maintained. we'd also like to understand what other considerations, because again, there's lack of clarity, I think, in this note. I've been a homeowner, original homeowner, new construction on this home since 1998, so for 27 years. I've raised my 3 daughters there, and it is my source of retirement. So any impact, the consideration of a new ordinance, I am worried would impact the resale of this, right? So that is a very important piece that I want to comment on. And so I'd ask that you grandfather the Pleasant Cove 3 homes into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Chelsea Adams.
Hi, Newcastle Planning Commission and City Planning Team. My name is Chelsea, and my husband Scott and our family are Newcastle residents in the Lake Washington Ridge neighborhood for 10 years now. Thank you for holding this meeting tonight and for your service to our community. We received the July 2nd letter informing us of potential setback increases at lots bordering certain designated wetland areas. We are very concerned, as are many friends and families in the neighborhood, and have lots of questions, and we look forward to the discussion tonight. One question at the forefront is, how can we definitively know what the green space type is behind our house? At the present time, we haven't been able to get an answer on that, so we're not quite sure how we're actually affected. If the app setback to our home is increased to the 50-foot, that line would go straight through our current kitchen, similarly. Here's how the possible setback increase could personally affect our family. We purchased our home 10 years ago with a certain set of setbacks and regulations. We've been saving and planning to add on to our home with a growing family. Our home addition that we plan to complete in the near term will support our aging parents that have needs, and it will also support our need for office space and to support our local family business. If our home is determined as bordering a critical wetland and there is no new increased setback from our app property line, if there is a new increase setback from our property line, we would not be able to add on to the house at all. From what we understand, we would be forever locked into our existing home footprint. We estimate the cost difference to sell our home and purchase a new one to then meet our needs would be substantially and unbearably higher, given the high value of real estate in our beautiful community and the investment we've made in our current property throughout the past decade. The proposal to change property setbacks will significantly reduce the value of our property and our collective neighbors potentially affected across the community. Here are some of our questions. Is there a consideration for grandfathering in existing parcels to retain all of their current rights? And for homes affected by this new setback requirement, if there was an unfortunate event like a fire or an earthquake where the homeowner has to repair the majority of the home, would we have to conform to the new 50-foot setback? We understand the proposal may have been driven by a Department of Ecology recommendation to increase the setbacks. And isn't this just a recommendation and not a requirement? Quoting from the Department of Ecology themselves, the recommendation around wetland guidance are intended to provide guidance for all local governments, but they may need to be tailored to fit individual circumstances. If adopted, would our property tax values be adjusted accordingly to reflect the loss of yard, use, or potential development loss? For example, the inability to add a future addition, a garden shed, or perhaps loss of our patio usage. Will reasonable compensation be provided for impacts as mentioned above? Thank you for your time and your consideration. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and discussion tonight on this situation.
Thank you. Next is Jerzy Białystok.
Which one? The top?
Oh, you're already on.
You already have? Okay.
Yeah.
So my name is Jerzy Białystok. I live in 8055, 144 Place, Southeast Newcastle. And I have a letter, then my protected area will be increased another 25 feet. So, and really, I don't see, from my point of view, reason to do that, because basically it's no wetland there. It's just runoff water from the hill and running over my property, and running to my neighbor property. Of course, this is called as a native growth protection area, and it's set back 25 feet, which is okay. I can agree with that, but I don't know how we can call this native growth protection. All the native, what we got 25 years when I bought this place was, old appliances in this area laying everywhere. And sometimes there was higher condensation of water in that area because my neighbor have a drainage there. And if the drainage got plugged, all the water goes up there. And it looks like, with a stream there or something else, but the city come to us and they ask us to restore the drainage. That was 20 years ago. So we restored the drainage, and pretty much water is not there only when it's run off from the hill, because we have a huge hill and it's mudslide area. And if it's this water condensating there on our property, also, the hill it's kind of not very stable. And there's some trees already laying on the side, they're healing over the street. So I think it's need to consider if this is really native growth protection because there's nothing there. And reduce the setback area maybe, or adjust these things. Because, if I'm going to have a 50 feet setback, that would be over my house. And this doesn't make sense. And also the property is set up for multi-unit development. So we did have investors there, builders, so they try to get this place, but because the setbacks and all this protected area, they just drop it all together. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak who didn't sign up? Okay, at 6:18, we'll close the public comment period. And I'm glad you're all still in your seats because a lot of your questions will be answered by the presentation that will be given by our planning director.
Oh, sorry.
Next up is commissioner comment. I'll open it up to any commissioner who raises their hand first who would like to make a comment. Vice Chair Troutman.
Thank you, Chair Gadzik. It's, as always, a pleasure to be here with my colleagues and our great staff. I'm particularly grateful to see the chairs filled up. Sadly, when that happens, it's because people are kind of agitated, and we understand that. As Chair Gadzik said, we'll try to answer those questions for you. And I want the answers to the same questions. To tell you the truth, I'm going to be learning along with you. So stick with us. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Commissioner Lowe.
Yeah, I want to mention, I appreciate the staff sent the letter last time when we discussed this. We suggested to have some communication to the community, especially for the owners who will be impacted. That time I have no idea. We sent almost 500 letters. So I appreciate the reach out. And I did receive some of the emails, and I think we probably can do one thing is continue the communication, have some frequent ask questions on the website. So because not everybody write email to us, and some of the answers are commonly asked. So it will be great if we continue the communication, keep the transparency. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioners wish to comment? All right, we'll move ahead with reports. The chair does not have a report. How about Director Fitzgibbons?
The director does
Nope.
not have a report.
Okay, good. We're going to move quickly to general business. There's no public hearing tonight. And the first item of the general business is the critical areas ordinance update. So Director Fitzgibbons, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair Gapsik. So we're doing this a little differently tonight. We have Katie Posler here with us. She's from Shockey Planning Group. And then on our Zoom, we have Darcy Miller, who is senior wetland biologist also with Shockey Planning Group. They've both been working with us on the critical areas update. So it's really great to have their expertise here. I'm going to start off the presentation, and then Darcy's going to talk about wetlands a little bit, and then I'll continue going. So if you want to go to the first slide there, we just did introduction, so we're going to do a quick status update with everyone. And we'll talk about wetland and stream buffers first. Then we'll get into outreach and community feedback. Then we'll get items 5, 6, and 7 here are the continued updates on the policy items we talked about last time. And then I did just a quick overview of the other edits to just provide you information on what the nature of them are. So this is still a work in progress, as Chair Gadsing mentioned. This is our July meeting. Right now, we're planning on having a public hearing on September 24th at 6 p.m. We did send our draft to Commerce because they require a 60-day review period. So it was maybe a little bit earlier than would have been ideal, but we do want to get them started on review because representatives from Ecology and DNR both will review what we've provided that you saw in the packet tonight. Next slide, please. Best available science. So this is something that is found in all the jurisdictions right now are doing their critical areas updates. It's part of the comprehensive plan process. We adopted a new comprehensive plan in March, and now we have to update and adopt new critical areas with ordinances as well as a zoning map if there are changes needed. And this is a process that happens once every 10 years. Of course, we can make interim changes if we need to, but this is definitely our time to make our biggest changes. So best available science is mentioned both in the state, both sections of the state code that we reference a lot. One is the RCW's, the Growth Management Act, that's the revised code of Washington. And then also in the Washington Administrative Code, they actually outline what best available science entails and all of the steps that you have to go through. The quote at the bottom of the slide here is actually a quote from the Washington Administrative Code. You'll hear people call that the WACS. There's case law that shows that if you make exceptions, like they understand, and as Ms. Adams pointed out earlier, this is guidance, but they do want you to base your changes on best available science. You are more prone to having an appeal on your code if you don't either have a good explanation for why you haven't implemented best available science, or if you just don't have any backup. But jurisdictions absolutely may have their own analyses. So as we go through this, if I feel like something is, I hope that the commission and those who are here tonight and other people will see that we've really tried to kind of dig into what best available science allows and what we see in other cities to kind of get a better feeling for what maybe we can do with our own code. Next slide, please. So I'm going to let Darcy take it over.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. There are 4 categories of wetlands, category 1 through 4, 1 being the highest quality. Maybe it has trees and an open water area and a grassy area and has a lot of different types of wildlife and has big forested areas all around it. And then down to a 4, which is our lowest quality. Maybe it's in a field with a lot of development around it, and then there's 2 and 3, which I most commonly see. My process for, I'm a wetland biologist, I've been doing this for 26 years, and so I will go out to a site and do a wetland delineation, and at that time I'm collecting a whole bunch of information to fill out the wetland rating form, and that's how you come up with that category 1 through 4. And within that form, there are 3 basic categories where you're looking at water quality, other water functions like flow, and then the habitat score. And if anyone has looked at the code and dug into the wetland section, you'll see habitat scores referred to a lot. And that's kind of just what it sounds like. What's the habitat like for various kinds of birds and wildlife and fish? And is it scoring high? And if it is, it needs more protection. So that's one thing we look at when we're figuring out what the buffer is going to be off a certain wetland. And then the other main type of category we look at is the impact classification, and that is high, moderate, and low. As you can see here, low is just unpaved trails, nature preserves. Moderate is, very common. We have, a single family home. And if you have multiple homes you're building, it's less than 1 unit per acre. Paved trails, the kind of stuff that's in between. And then high, of course, is commercial and multifamily residential, greater than 1 unit per acre. So we look at those 2 main categories when we're like in a matrix, figure out what the buffer size is. So next slide, please. Okay, here you can see we've tried, hopefully it's not too blurry. We've tried to show on the left what the current buffers are, on the right what the proposed buffers are. Now, a main difference you'll see first is in the current one, we have the low column, and then we combine the high and moderate impacts. In the new proposed code, not new yet, but what's proposed, we're breaking out that moderate and high. So now we have 3 different categories. So we're just trying to get a little more specific. With moderate impacts in the proposed code, those are the same as what are high and moderate in the current code. So yes, you will see in the high impact in the proposed code, the farthest right column, we have an increase in the buffer sizes. And these are in line with what Ecology is recommending. And to speak to that comment, absolutely, these are recommendations from Ecology, and they have different options and ways we can kind of move things around, but we have to address them. And so we'll talk more about that. But basically, what we came up with in this case, in the current code, you basically have to say, in order to get these buffer sizes, they're outlined in red on the current code, you have to meet all kinds of best practices. Direct lights away, keep your stormwater out of the wetlands. There's a whole list that I'll show in the next slide. But in the proposed code, we are saying you don't have to meet all of those. You certainly can if you want. But we have the incentive now, if you're proposing a high impact, you can also implement those best practices and get it down, get your buffer down to the moderate. So you're back into the red column there of moderate impact uses, which is same as what we have now. We still have buffer averaging proposed in the proposed code, which we have now, and that's just taking one part of a buffer out away from one area and adding an equivalent amount to another area, and it has to be equivalent or better value in the new area. So we certainly still have the options to bring your buffers down in all instances. And let's go to the next slide, and I'll talk more about the.
I just wanted to mention. Sorry. Darcy, I don't know if you said this, but in our current code, where those moderate to high are, if you don't meet this list of incentives that Darcy's going to go over, staff have been required to add 33% to the buffer. So it's essentially the same. It's just changing it so that the applicant shows us, yes, we've met these things, and this is why I get this buffer, rather than us having to use the stick, so to speak, rather than the incentive. Okay, go ahead, Darcy.
Thanks, Erin. I thought the best practices one was next. So this is kind of what I've already gone over. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here's your list of best practices or minimization measures. There's lots of different terms for it. And it's just, as you can see, the disturbance of lights that can be with parking lots, warehouses, manufacturing, residential, direct the lights away. I'm not going to go through all of them. You guys can read it, but you're just trying to really minimize those impacts that happen when. And so this is what you will need to show that you're doing if you want to bring your buffer down when you're doing high impact. Okay, next slide. And I'll pass it back to Erin.
Okay. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions on the commission about the wetlands for Darcy before I move on to streams?
I'm sorry, but.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we're not taking questions from the audience at this point. Okay.
Okay.
There will,
Oh, I'm sorry, from the commission.
yeah. Well, I just want to say, I understand your need to ask questions, and I think it will help us to hear your questions. So let me think about how we can do that while we continue with the meeting, okay?
Okay. So stream options. In 2020, the Department of Natural Resources came out with a new way of protecting stream ecology. And they do this through this, and I recognize now that I'm in this room that it's hard to read the highlighted text there, but it's called a riparian management zone. And when we post this to the website, that actually has a link if you're curious to read more about this. But basically, the riparian management zone includes the channel of the stream, the riparian zone, which is the area adjacent to the stream with the specific plants and habitat, and then this zone of influence, which is upland, but it's still the trees and the duff and whatnot still feed into the cycle of the ecoregion. And so that is what we're calling. So it's everything from the channel through the zone of influence is this riparian management zone. And this is again from DNR's Department of Natural Resources best available science. Next slide, please. So what they show on this graph is that for the trees play a large part in a stream ecology. And so what they're saying here is that for the height of a tree, there's been research done that shows if you have a 1-to-1 ratio of the height of the tree at 200 years old, you'll have 100% effectiveness if your buffer is the same size as the height of the tree. So if you have a 100-foot tall tree on average at 200 years, you need a 100-foot basically riparian management zone. It is more aware of the overall function, and we're not necessarily suggesting that we do this, but we're kind of giving you the background on what DNR has put out. Again, it's based on the height of a tree at 200 years old. DNR suggests that even if you're not going to follow this exact science, you should have at minimum 100 feet of area between the stream channel and as your buffer, because that will filter out 95% of the pollutants. There is an online map of tree heights in the area. They provide this. This example that's on the screen is, that's just south of Lake Boren at Boren Creek. Those are Douglas fir trees, and the average height at 200 years old is 196 feet. So if you move on to the next slide, we understand that this guidance is really in the best It's really the best for nature and the ecology, and it probably works great in some instances, but it is harder to determine from just looking at the code, if we were to implement this, what somebody's buffer would be. They'd have to go to this map, they'd have to have somebody come out and do a review. There's additional verification required, additional studies. It's case by case. As cities of Langley and Anacortes have both implemented this, but they also went ahead and did the analysis needed to let people know, well, if you have certain kinds of soils and certain kinds of trees, this is what your RMZ is, your riparian management zone. It also, and you might have already gathered this from what I was saying, but this also would implement much greater basically buffers than what we're seeing now. If you want to go to the next slide, you'll see here on this that types F, NP, and NS occur in the city. These are stream types. So when you're looking at 100 feet and we're proposing 150, and I'll tell you why in a moment, we would be looking more at close to 200, where Douglas firs are common around people's properties, and of course those are really common in this area. We do have, I did notice on some properties like up near Aegis, red alder was what was mapped. For one thing, red alder is a nuisance species in our code, and another, they're only 100 feet. So at the north end of Lake Warren, you'd be looking at a 100-foot buffer. In the south end, you'd be looking at a 200-foot buffer. So I don't know if that science, you'd kind of have to have somebody go out and verify if this is really the best thing. So you'd be having a lot of verification happen. So this is the proposal that we put in our draft. The reason we use these numbers is because we looked around at other cities to see what they were doing. And we saw this was in Sammamish's. We read their best available science. They didn't talk too much about why they went to 75 and 50 feet for no fish, perennial, and seasonal. And the difference between those is that a seasonal, and people may already understand this just by reading it, but a seasonal stream would just have water for parts of the year, and a perennial stream would be pretty much constantly flowing. But neither one of them are known to have fish. In Newcastle, we do have a lot of fish-bearing streams. That's something to be aware of. May Creek, Newport Hills Creek, Gypsy Creek, even some of the tributaries that come off of May Creek. So this, even just the upstream type buffer at 150 feet will impact properties. But this is what we put forward. It doesn't mean that we have to. Also on this presentation slide right here at the bottom is the application mapping tool. And I'll also, as Commissioner Lowe mentioned, putting information on our website. I will link this tool there as well, but this is a way to find out what the stream type is near your home. Of course, the best way to find out what the stream type is near your home is to actually have somebody go out and delineate it and do a review. Because they change over time. Next slide, please. So what are our options? So we, like Langley and Anacortes, we could use RMZs. We could do a hybrid. The city of Covington right now is saying, okay, well, there was that guidance that DNR gave out that said, okay, 100 feet should be your minimum buffer. They're still deciding what they're going to do for fish-bearing streams. In Sammamish's best available science, it did mention that because their tree range between alder and Douglas fir there as well, the 150 was kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the mean between the two. Or we could just propose more traditional buffers with restoration required, which is something Sammamish did, which would be more of our recommended option. It does keep things a little bit more similar to what property owners currently have. We're very sensitive to, especially with the last few years, all the housing push, trying to help homeowners keep their homes. because the cost of housing is just skyrocketing and there's not enough housing out there. Do we have to do it? Again, it's a guide, but there is a push for the use of best available science. Next slide, please. I put this in there. I don't think we need to go over it right now, but this is pretty much the requirement from Sammamish. So it would be those buffer widths, but then you also have to make sure that the buffers are vegetated and actually functioning. Can't just be a bunch of like dead grass on a hill or rocks or whatnot. It would need to be vegetated. Otherwise, the buffer would need to be increased by 33%. So one option that we may have on existing lots, Anacortes did this, was they exempted existing developed lots and platted lots that were existing prior to adoption of their most recent critical areas code. So if you were in an existing recorded subdivision, you were exempted. They did have requirements. The exemptions were you couldn't add more than 2,800, you couldn't clear more than 2,800 square feet. You'd have to show why the new single-family dwellings or new dwelling units couldn't go on existing locations. Critical areas in their buffers could not be turned into lawn. And they did exempt normal appearances, I hate that word, I don't enjoy saying, but which would include garages and decks, kind of normal things that people have on their lots. So it would be an option, and I think for Planning Commission to discuss tonight is the direction with streams that they'd like us to go. We'll talk about the planning calendar at the end of the meeting, but we have August and then the hearing. So we have time to put additional information together for sure. So with that said, are there any burning questions from the commissioners on the streams or the riparian management zones that you'd like me to answer before we move on to the other updates?
Vice Chair. Vice Chair comment.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm particularly interested in these exemptions because these folks out here, they've bought their property with certain expectations and somebody's jerked the rug out from under them and it's kind of changing the rules around. So if it says that we can incorporate these, or apparently Anacortes might have incorporated some of these, I'm assuming that we could probably do the same and alleviate a lot of the stress that's going on in the audience. Is that we could come up with a criteria for exemptions?
Yeah, that's what we were thinking.
Well, it's up to the commission, but if it was me, I'd come up with the most amount of it, do the minimum amount possible and really look into the exemptions and ways to get variances and whatnot so that people can continue to use their property in the manner in which they're accustomed.
I should mention that in other parts of the code, we've exempted existing building footprints already, making sure that we have that for wetland and stream buffers. But this would be in addition to for these stream areas.
The exemption model that Anacortes followed, does that exempt more than the existing footprint? In other words, would that allow a landowner to add on to their house, as we've heard tonight that people want to do?
That's what it looked like to me. And I just found that, I think we just found that in the last few days, to be honest, but it looked like, so for them, you can, if you can rate it, under the exemptions with criteria such as, and it says less than a, and then it's in parentheses, a certain number of square feet cleared in riparian area. Anacortes did go with the riparian management zone, so their buffers are really large. So, but for them, it was 2,800 square feet of cleared area. maybe for us, it would be 2,500 because that's how much area you need for, and we're actually going to use that number later on when we talk about an exemption or a variance. That's the amount of square feet you don't even need a clearing grade permit for. So it's kind of this number that's already established in our code. But we'd have to figure that out for ourselves, like what works best. But a 2,800 square foot cleared area is quite large when you think of a lot of these lots are going to be 10,000 square feet and smaller. And their house is already built.
And 2,800 is, that's the amount of the house that's already there plus whatever is added onto it. It's the total amount?
From what I was reading, and of course I'll have to verify what they were showing, but it was additional cleared area, so, in the riparian management zone, so.
Commissioner Blocker?
Yeah. Aaron, can you clarify the bolded opening paragraph up there? It says ordinance 4025, well, that's their ordinance number, but that satisfies one or more of the provisions in table, you read the number.
Yeah.
Exempt activities or table, you read the number. What has to be satisfied before we get to the exemptions can work?
Right, so their exempt activities are really similar to ours, being able to put in access to a lot when no access exists, other than going through the buffer, or their other exempt activities would be weeding out noxious weeds and, let's see here, utilities. Do we have any other really good exemptions that you can think of? I'm looking at our other planners. But that's okay. The permitted alterations then would be kind of these 4 items were ones that I pulled out from their permitted alterations. So you can alter this area in an existing platted lot following these guidelines, basically. And to be honest, if the buffer distances are increasing, we would anticipate having additional what's called a reasonable use exception permit. And sorry, this is kind of tangential to what you asked, Commissioner Blocker, but a reasonable use exception permit is for lots that are inundated with critical areas and their buffers, and it allows the minimum use of the site already. And what we've seen a lot of are lots, for example, around Lake Boren, where these homes are old and they just need to replace them. And our current code doesn't allow you to do that without going through this additional process, which adds on to the time and the cost of additions for homes. So doing something like these exemptions would also probably decrease the number of reasonable use exceptions that we're already seeing, or could anticipate to see.
Commissioner Cack?
Just going back to, I think some of the folks just mentioned grandfathering in some of their properties. Would that maybe fall, you recommended accepting existing lots before, exemption for existing lots before adoption, or the subdivision. Is that something that we could consider as well, where we could have those homes fall in that, in the exemption category?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes, I just want to follow on. What is the difference, meaning the grandfathering versus the exemption? And the second question is, on that exemption, is that the exempted activities, is it all inclusive, or it's also subjected to interpretation by certain body?
Yeah, so they should be objective. Definitely we'll want ours to be objective, as that's something we're really striving for in our code. I think these are fairly subjective. When they say it's not feasible to avoid the critical area through other means, they may have decision criteria already in their code. We do. What we're looking for is if you can't build a home that's commensurate with homes around the area, that would be a possible exemption. But then having a certain amount of clearing, these I believe, and Katie and Darcy can let me know if I'm incorrect, but I think we were thinking earlier that you could hit any number one of these. They could all be, you could look at all of them together, or maybe only one of them pertains to you, but you can, these would be the exemption that would be available. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I want to go back to the grandfather and
Oh, right.
exemption that my thinking is if when we say grandfather, there is kind of a cutoff time, right? And when we say exemption here, does that mean there's not necessarily a cutoff timeline, but more about the activities? I just want some clarification on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you did say that. A grandfathering would be what we call a legal nonconformity. So you may have a property that, and they're already out there where, well, for example, we don't allow gas stations at Cold Creek Parkway and Newcastle Way anymore, but there's the ARCO station there. So that's a legal nonconformity. It's grandfathered in. We have requirements in our code that say, okay, once you hit this threshold, this has to be replaced with something that conforms to our current code. But we're not going to make you tear down or stop using it as a gas station right now. The exemption would be like, well, on this zone, this area, if it's a subdivision level, these criteria just don't apply to you. And because you meet this cutoff. And any new development, you don't have to pay attention to this particular criteria, if that makes sense.
Would the exemption apply to a lot where there's nothing built now?
We would need to decide that for ourselves. It could be a lot size that we look at. It could be, I think, exempting, thinking about the size of the city, we have a lot of recorded subdivisions, so it could just be at the recorded subdivision level, whether or not the lot is developed or not. And then for some of these older, large lots that have just been cut up over time, that aren't part of subdivisions, then it would apply to them, whether or not they're developed on.
I know that the devil is in the details, and we don't have the details yet of what this would look like. But it sounds potentially like a wonderful, easy solution that would alleviate a lot of people's concerns and keep us in compliance with state law. But that sounds too easy. I mean, it's not like other state mandates that we've had to deal with in the last year or two. So I guess I'm looking for, where's the downside in this?
I don't know. Darcy, do you want to address what the ecological downsides to this could be?
Sure. Can you show me that slide again? Sorry. Thanks. Of course, any smaller buffer or placement of development closer to a wetland or stream is going to result in, lower function potentially. It's going to affect the wetland or stream. But if we've successfully seen Anacortes have these exemptions or similar in their code, it seems like we should be able to propose them as well and get them through. I think it's a great option, especially given we have a lot of small lots in the city, and we can fine tune them to meet our specifics in the city. We have a lot of differences between us and Anacortes, of course, maybe not along the water, but yeah, I think we can look at other codes as well that have recently been adopted in other nearby cities. I know Erin's been doing a lot of that already, and find perhaps other, maybe even other exemptions, and really dial them in for our city.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yeah, I also have another question. Go back to the buffer, and there are several charts. One shows this is stream buffers. There is a current versus proposed. And Aaron, I think you mentioned something, maybe I didn't hear right. I think I heard there is a moderate and a high, and we will do, when people apply, there will be like 30% or 33% add-on. What is the difference, or I guess, meaning if you go look at the other side, the other slide, the proposed and the current, it's more than 30%. So does that mean we can actually also use the 30% methodology? Is that still best available science? Or, I mean, I kind of not sure, like when we come up with those numbers, what's the evidence to demonstrate this number I proposed is under the guidance of best available science, or this is maximum, this is minimum, this is the best that we can do, or this, there seems like a lot of wiggle room there.
Yeah.
I will say, I believe the 33% number was from older science. And so what they're recommending now from ecology and all the best available science supporting what they've written shows those numbers that we're seeing here in the high impact land use table.
And different, you did mention the moderate and high. So the moderate and high has to do with the wetland buffers. Then in the stream buffers, what I was talking about with the 33% is the way that Sammamish presented their code. So if you go back to the stream buffers for Sammamish, so these numbers are the buffer if you restore your the buffer area. If you don't, then their code says that you have to increase by 33% each of those buffer widths. And that's Sammamish's code. I'm not saying we have to do that, but I think that may have been how they justified the smaller buffer was, we're going to enhance it.
Okay, yeah, we were mixing up the wetland and stream things there. So, yeah, you'd basically have to add 33% if you have a bad quality buffer on the stream and you can't plant it or you don't want to plant it, but say you have a lot of extra space, you are cool with increasing it by 33%, those numbers in the last small table. But most people will probably choose to do plantings, but when you do plantings to restore, then you have to monitor for 5 years. So that's not an easy thing all the time either.
Commissioner Van Natta?
Yeah, could you go back to that chart with the proposed, I think a couple slides
For
back.
streams? Or
No, the one just prior to that. Yeah, some about this chart to me is not adding up, because on the vertical axis, you have the category 1, 2, 3, and horizontally, you have the low, medium, or moderate, high impact. But all the numbers are the same. So if, a category 1 habitat score 8 to 9 is, 150, 225, 300, low, moderate, high. Category 2, the 8 to 9 points is the same, and for category 3, 8 to 9 points is the same. So in effect, you don't even need the category of the stream. You're just saying if it's moderate impact, it's 225 feet kind of thing. So, I mean, to me, it should if category one's the most important thing to protect, high impact should have the furthest distance. It just doesn't seem like the chart's making sense to me in that regard.
Yeah, this is taken exactly from ecology's guidance, and I had the same questions. And so, in looking at it, they're really just putting a lot of emphasis on the habitat score. And so, the existing wetland habitat out there is like their most important number. So, yeah, it's a little odd, I will say. I don't know the writers of the all the science, but we could inquire for more clarification. I've been in touch with the Department of Ecology person who's kind of guiding and helping people through this process at all the cities in Washington and counties. So
Yeah, I would be curious if there's some reasoning behind that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
And I will say, in the guidance, there were types of wetlands listed under category 1 and 2 that we don't have. Interdunal, which is like sand dunes and whatnot, and estuary. And those only showed up in some of these, and those had different buffers. So it may be that I just didn't this could be consolidated more because of their special wetland types. The only ones we have are forested in Newcastle. So that could be just my error when I was looking at it.
So we,
Well, then
So we-
again, sorry.
say we go the route of the exemptions, that they're exemptions from something else. What is the something else? So do we still have to amend our buffers to some other standard, but do we need to talk about what that is?
I would be curious to know kind of where the commission is leaning just from, I think my own, after reading the research, it is hard to justify putting out for the streams 100-foot, not putting out 100-foot minimum buffer when they say that's, 100 feet should be your minimum for removing 95% of the pollutants from the stream. And of course, anything shorter than that is going to. But at the same time, I totally understand that that's really big. Going from 25 to 100 feet is huge. And is there much difference between going from, if we have 50 and then everyone is, and then there's additional planting on that, if it's restored or enhanced, does that do the same benefit as that 100-foot just blank buffer? So while I would just be interested to hear, and this is assuming existing subdivisions are exempted. I'd be interested what commissioners are leaning towards. Just, would you like us to find out? I mean, I think regardless, we would find out more about how Sammamish justified these smaller buffers, or if other cities are doing it. Bellevue's coming out with their draft code in the next month, so we'll see a lot of other cities coming out with draft codes.
Can I just say something, Erin? real
Oh,
quick?
yeah, please.
So in comparison, the RNZ method, that's the other, that Langley and Anacortes have implemented. That is, you're gonna have 196-foot buffer to 200 feet generally in all the areas we looked at their tool online. So what we're proposing is much less than that. Yes, it is an increase from what we have now. We can still do buffer averaging. That's in our code. So you can still get it down 25%. But Sammamish had it approved that, you know, they could have these smaller buffers in our green table that was just out. But we really, they'd be much larger if we used the RMZ method in comparison.
So yeah, I guess I'm curious to hear after the presentation if the commissioners have questions they'd like us to research or a direction they'd like us to go. I assume it's not using this RMZ method, but.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yeah, I would like to understand more about grandfathering versus the exemption, specifically on the scope, meaning how many properties will be impacted. Because one thing is I will think from the process standpoint, grandfathering will be easier to control and also have the impact because the exemption basically are talking about the more than just the current. There's also future things, right? You are going to exempt. So that scope
Right.
is huge. And compared to grandfather, you will have the existing situation you want to, they are current, maybe not in conforming with the proposed code, you grandfather them, right? And so I would like to see what from the administration standpoint, what those I will kind of at this point, based on very limited knowledge I have, I will lean into the grandfathering the process. Feel like, again, it seems like a more controllable scope.
Would you grandfather to the property level?
Yeah, so like the folks are saying they own this property for that many years, right? Now, all of a sudden, this will change, they will have concerns, so can we, you know, there is a timeline or something we can put, saying, I mean, when they purchase it, this is okay, so shall we grandfather that? That's what my thought goes.
Any other questions from commissioners? Vice Chair Troutman?
Quickly, Director Fitzgibbons, you mentioned that there's occasions where people are going to have somebody come out and, you know, assess their thing. I'm kind of curious about a couple of things. Is that at homeowner's expense to do that? Okay. And then when you were talking about ways to get around, whether this was required or not, I'm still having trouble grasping some of the intricacies. That the last time someone asked if it's required, you said there's a push for basic, you know, best available science. Well, a push is kind of a vague term, and that I'm going to push back. So, in other words, you didn't say it has to be done. You said, well, it's kind of a recommendation, or there's a push towards this. There has to be some sort of a defining criteria to, you know, let people know is, are we wasting our time trying to change this because the state's going to do what they want, or, you know, where does the line start in terms of, I mean, can someone just say, yes, it's required, or no, it's not required? I understand there's a lot of in between there, but in general, it seems like, particularly with this exemption situation, that we actually do have quite a bit of control in trying to maintain things the way they are. You know, grandfathering, anecdotally to me, means that you just leave things the way they are.
I mean, I guess grandfathering, the idea behind grandfathering is to require future development to build. So I'm gonna back up. Best available science is required by the RCWs, and there's a whole outline of how to do it in the WACs. What I'm quite honestly learning is, as we go through this process, more about is how different cities use that best available science to justify their actions. Because if it was just up to the best available science and if you didn't have your own and you had to use Department of Natural Resources, we'd all have these riparian management zones, right? Or we'd use the minimum recommendation of 100 feet as a buffer area. And they don't, from what I've seen so far in DNR, they don't talk about exemptions too much. So then the point of grandfathering is that future development will, quite frankly, be more either cognizant or more, in this case, they would use more current thinking behind the development. Like, again, the ARCO station is in a key place in downtown. It's not the best location for a gas station from an urban design standpoint.
I'm primarily concerned with existing lots, future development. You can make them do whatever you want. It's a condition upon when they get there, they know what the rules were. Whereas the way that this is coming down, the rules have been changed in the middle of the game. And whether it's through grandfathering or exemptions or whatever. I talked to a lot of people this weekend, half of China Creek and some other people's that I read Scott and Chelsea's letter. I read everybody's letters, and the theme seems to be, let's keep Newcastle. Let's keep it as, through whatever means, let's keep things as close to where they are now. I often thought that, if a bunch of the cities on the east side here, the little cities, Woodinville and Black Diamond and stuff, all formed a coalition, we could, you'd have more say in pushing back against the state. But just as far as we go, the people are pretty much telegraphing that they want things to kind of stay the way that they are, or at least if we have a range of dimensions and options, to keep it on the minimum side of whatever the requirements were.
Yeah.
Commissioner Keck.
So, I feel like going to exemptions, it becomes a slippery slope. There's half of the people who have exemptions, and they're going to be happy, but then there are the others who don't fall in that category, and then they are upset because, look what's happening to their property. So I would highly recommend that either we, like Commissioner Lowe said, either we grandfather in everybody, the existing subdivision, and then maybe have a new rule where we are now adding, more requirements for the new constructions or lots. But at the same time, I think there was somebody else who asked about what is this going to do to our property taxes? How does it impact that? So I think there's some of the things that we probably want to consider. And also, I would be highly interested in learning how Sammamish, city of Sammamish, how did they go about? Because it's similar, maybe not in size, but very similar in demographics to us. So I want to know how they went about, doing this, and also getting. I'm guessing they got approved for it, right? Because when they submitted, right? So
It's published.
yeah. So that would be wonderful to see how they did it. Thank you.
Yeah, so all of these proposed buffers were intended to protect the environment. If we take an approach that basically preserves the status quo in terms of the property owner's rights, and there were actions that would degrade the environment, would we know about it? And if we knew about it, does the city have a means to mitigate that?
Critical areas violations are reported, like all of our other violations, in which case the city can, and I think this is what you're talking about, is really
Well,
just.
I guess a violation could be just not having the right buffer, but not having the right buffer doesn't necessarily mean that you're degrading the environment. I mean, it could be that it's benign, it's technically a violation, but there's no source of pollution that's going into a creek, for example. There's no erosion that could, there's no visible or even not visible, but provable damage to the environment. And I wouldn't want us, I'd want the city to be able to retain its ability to stop something that was actually causing some damage to the environment.
Yeah, I think, do we know about, we know about it on a larger scale, like if somebody was constructing a home in a wetland buffer, kind of that scale, or we've had folks just go out and start grading their lots that are inundated with critical areas without permits, and we've had to go out there and stop it. I would anticipate this would be a lot on the same level. It's gonna be a larger improvement. It's not gonna be if somebody puts in, and I shouldn't give away too many secrets, but, if somebody puts in, an HVAC unit in their side yard and nobody ever complains, we might not know about it. So that's how it works generally.
So in the normal process, if a homeowner who has a property wants to add on to it and they're exempted because of the way we write this ordinance, would the normal permitting process and inspection process enable the city to see that, oh, you're building that in a way that is going to cause an environmental problem and therefore you can't do it? Does the city retain that kind of ability?
Yeah, we would, if you're doing an addition, hopefully you're submitting a building permit, and under the building permit, a site plan review is required, and we look at critical areas as part of the site plan review. So,
What other feedback would you like from the commission on this?
I guess, does the, would the commission say that they're mostly interested in understanding better kind of what Sammamish did and what other cities are doing more along the more traditional methods that align closer to what we've had in the past? Do staff need to look further into this 100-foot minimum buffer for riparian areas at all? I think that's probably my biggest lingering question, because it is a suggestion from DNR that there's research out there that shows that this, for a new lot on a stream that's not fish bearing, would we want to consider implementing this 100-foot buffer, or would commission suggest we look more at like Sammamish's method with the reduced buffers with planting enhancement?
Is that something that, I got the feeling that if you chose, we're gonna do a riparian zone, you're locked into that particular categorization. And if that's the case, I just wouldn't particularly care for that, because it wouldn't necessarily include the exemptions, would it?
So, no, it could. What DNR suggested in their report for best available science was just flat out, at minimum, to reduce pollutants in the ecology of a stream, you should have at least 100-foot minimum buffer area. And we could implement that as a buffer for our perennial and seasonal non-fish bearing streams. Or we can go with, we could look into both, honestly. But, and that's something that Covington is looking at right now is, do they kind of keep the same structure that we have with the types, but their absolute minimum buffer is gonna be 100 feet, possibly. So then, because of that statement in the best available science. But Sammamish reduced them and then required enhanced plantings. And we would, is there a preference for the commission to be able to have those enhanced plantings and then actually keep that buffer smaller? Is that correct?
Well, depends on, how does that, implementing that 100-foot buffer, how does that apply to the people that are wanting an exemption? Are they exempt from that 100-foot buffer? So,
Yeah, if we were saying all recorded subdivisions in the city are exempt from these conditions, either they're grandfathered into the previous code requirement or they're, or we're just gonna have exemptions. I mean, an exemption could just even be for a lot size, right? It could be, oh, if your lot is 7,500 square feet or smaller, you get an exemption. It doesn't, it can really be based on anything. So we could, for example, we could exempt, you know, all lots, let's say it's 8,000 square feet and smaller. Everything bigger has a different buffer if they're adjacent to, you know, different types of streams. And we can cut it up. We can put a lot of minutia in there. It's just hard to control.
so I like that.
Kind of more of a square footage size?
Well,
or-
I like having that buffer because I think it's a good thing environmentally. I like it not being forced upon people that have already invested and so we've carved out an exception for those people. But for lots that are big enough, and we rely on your recommendation for that, to build on, that aren't built on, that have a 100-foot buffer, that seems like a reasonable thing to ask in order to incrementally add to our environmental protection. Any commissioners
I like that
see
idea.
that
I think
different?
you said that well.
Would be supportive, yep.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like we have commission support for that.
I'll finish up the presentation. Good conversation, thank you. Before we move on from wetlands and stream buffers, I know there have been questions about how it affects taxes. I know that there can be exemptions and I don't know what the right word is, but that's something you have to work out with the assessor. And I will put that in my response letter that I still owe about 40-something people. And I also wanted to mention, for trying to figure out what your wetland buffer is, we actually have on the city's document center, and I'll also put this link on the website, we have the plat maps. So it's possible that the plat maps for different subdivisions actually show what the wetland was mapped as at the time of subdivision. That doesn't mean that the wetland is still that, but it would give you a better idea of, like, is it really small and not so great, like a type 4, or is this like really a critical wetland? And, you know, this could mean that it's, you know, this could really be something I have to pay a lot of attention to. But of course, our wetland buffers aren't changing as much. But just to answer those questions, we'll put some resources on the website, and I will include a link for everybody on that. So,
Including the commissioners?
and the commissioners, yes, I will CC you on my response. Okay, let's move on. Okay, outreach and community feedback. I haven't said this, but thank you to the people who read the letter and came out and didn't just throw it in your recycling. It was really great to hear from people. Tyler Coyle, who's our associate planner, he's over there. He did the mapping for us. Thank you, Tyler. And the way that we did that, if you want to go, I think it's the next slide. So you can see kind of the light blue outline. So that's just a buffer. It's a 50-foot buffer on all the waterways in the city. Actually, do you want to explain what you did? Do you feel like talking? Sorry, I'm
Sure.
going to stop talking.
Yeah, so we started with our publicly available stream and wetland data. These data are not completely perfect, especially on the wetlands. There can be sometimes small wetlands that are just poorly mapped or didn't exist when the data was created. But this is the best we have, and so we start with that data, and then we blow out a 50-foot buffer from all three sources, essentially merge the buffers into one, and then we intersect all of the properties in the city with that buffer. So if your property touches that buffer by as much as a foot, you're getting a letter. And we decided to be a little bit better to slightly slightly over-inform than under. But that is where this map is coming from.
Thanks, Tyler. So even, and there are exemptions existing in the code, like if a buffer goes over a maintained city street, it ends at the city street, assuming there's not an additional wetland or stream on the other side. But if it's just a buffer that's crossing, it stops at the street. So if you're actually on the other side of the street, it's very likely that the buffer doesn't even affect you. So there's some rules in the code about this. Other common questions, if you'll go back up, sorry, Katie. Add me to the mailing list. That was, of course, the biggest one. Is there really a critical area near me? Possibly. Consideration for loss of usable land. It's not considered a taking under the state's code. But that doesn't, like I said before, I do think the assessor, there may be some sort of designation you can put on your lot for lands that are less usable. What does this mean for my existing improvements? They're grandfathered in. Your existing improvements, regardless, are allowed to stay where they are. You don't have to remove anything. And what about future development? We've already kind of talked about that, but it could be affected if we don't have exemptions. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay. Last time we were here, we talked about building setbacks from critical areas. The reason for this is really for structures. So it's a building setback, it's for structures. It'd be for homes, or like, I don't know, I guess if you had like some sort of vault right on your property line, what it does would make it so that you don't have to go into the critical area buffer to maintain your house, which then degrades the buffer. Commission asked if there was any sort of exemption or variance we could grant for this. We looked at the code and we suggested allowing people who have an existing home on the lot to be able to go down, that is not conforming, to be able to go down to 5 feet for additional improvements or just to maintain or whatever they need to do to make sure it's legally. But that would be an administrative variance process. So that would go through yours truly. And that's how we're suggesting that. So mitigation monitoring time frame. So as Darcy mentioned earlier, 3 years, when you plant to enhance or restore a wetland or stream buffer, there's a 5-year monitoring period to make sure that the plants actually survive and you don't have a bunch of nuisance species in there. Something that Darcy had told us was that in some cities, they actually have a reduced time frame. rather than having it be up to the discretion of the department, we were trying to come up with some sort of threshold. And so we put the threshold potentially at 2,500 square feet. So if it's 2,500 square feet or smaller, you could be reduced down to 3 years from the 5-year time frame, assuming that in those first 3 years, the growing is looking great, your plants are looking great, and you're meeting all the requirements. The reason that we use the 2,500 square foot, again, as I mentioned earlier, is that at 2,500 square feet, that's the threshold for requiring a clear and grade permit. So if you don't have a critical area or buffer on your site, you don't have to get a permit up to that size just for doing clearing. But if you do have a critical area, you get the permit, then you have to do the planting, and then you have to monitor. So it just was trying to give some more parity and lessen the burden on people who are doing these like smaller projects that normally wouldn't even require a permit. All the other changes in our code proposed are definitions, updates to code references, aligning code with state requirements. They're relatively minor changes. I hope that you've all had a chance to review the spreadsheet that was provided. And they're just some typos and removing redundancies. I would suggest that for next time, when we give out your packet, make sure you read those, because I'm not planning on going over those. I don't think anyone wants to hear me read new definitions for wetlands. But if you do want to go over them, please let me know if you think we should go over them one by one. Next slide. I think that's it.
What would happen at our August meeting on this subject?
We would come back with probably stream buffer. It sounds like that's the one we really need to work out. Would you all concur? Generally, the stream buffer is the one that we would talk about that and hopefully provide final
And
direction.
also,
Oh, go ahead.
excuse me, I was thinking also why the buffers are the same for categories 1, 2, 3, with the same habitat scores that are high.
Thank you.
Talking to ecology about that. If the commission wants that information.
So would we have more definition about exemptions at that point as well?
Yeah, so we would have the sort of the exemptions and where we would see potentially this 100-foot buffer fitting in for the non-fish bearing streams, and then as Darcy said, then the habitat scores.
Would we have a sense of how many properties would be affected by the 100-foot buffer that would not be eligible for an exemption?
I think we could probably pull those out in GIS and do an analysis.
Yeah, so long as we have a rational, logical way to get there, we can show it in GIS.
Yeah.
But we will not be looking at a proposed ordinance. That would not come in August.
Well, we'll provide the same draft that we have right now, so we'll keep sending the red lines with our packets. But the final ordinance would be in September for the hearing.
Yeah.
I'd probably get the actual ordinance language together for next month, just to be ahead of that.
I just have one question. When I think Vice Chair mentioned earlier, on the exemption, if people want to apply for exemption, is there a cost, and will we be able to know? I mean, some probably is kind of easy documentation also. I'm just wondering if we are doing this process, should we also gather those information in terms of what is the cost, the burden you
Yeah.
need to apply for the exemption?
So my thought and how our current code works is that it would be an objective code that just had criteria, so there'd be no extra cost. It's just if you meet these criteria, you're exempted.
No need to apply.
Right, no need to apply. Yeah. you want to do Q&A? It's not normal, but
Um,
it's up to you.
Would you say that a little bit louder?
Would you like to do question and answer? It's not our normal way of doing things, but everybody's here and we have Darcy on the line.
Let me ask, who still has questions after hearing all of this information? So we've got 4 questions. Let me ask also, who here is here for the zoning issue as opposed to the critical areas? Just one person. One thing we could do is change our agenda to have our second public comment period now. And then let people use that as an opportunity to ask their questions, and we can answer those questions. But we would not have a public comment period after the zoning discussion. However, if you had questions, you could just ask after the meeting's over, and we could address those questions. So if
Yeah, I already said before, we have a runoff. My property is on 144.
Well, let's not discuss it now. I just want to make sure we're changing, we would be changing the agenda, and this public comment period now would come before we talk about the zoning. So the zoning is going to be, there's going to be another presentation on zoning. But I'm suggesting that we give people who are here for the critical areas a chance to ask their questions, and then we'll move to the presentation on zoning, but you're going to have to stick around longer because of that, to hear that. So, okay. I don't know what the procedure is, but are there any objections from the commission about changing the order of the agenda? I'm sure there's a process that we should follow, but. Okay, well. All right, so let's do it formally.
I move to make the suggested changes to the agenda.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? Okay, so we are now moving to our second public comment period. And we don't have a sign-up sheet, but we'll just, those of you who have questions now, feel free to approach the podium. We can, again, we'll have 3 minutes, and after you've all asked your questions, we will try to address them. We won't address them live. We'll wait till everybody asks their questions, and then we will address them, okay? All right. Go ahead, sir. Your name and where do you live?
Thank you. My name is Rich Wagner. I live at 2411 Garden Court North in Renton, but I own 5.5 acres in the Coddington area. Thus is why I'm here. That 5.5 acres is undeveloped. It was purchased 2 generations ago, so it's still in our family holding. The other part of my introduction is I want to thank all of you here because I served on the Renton Planning Commission for 13 years, and I know that some of these issues are just tough, and yet that's what you signed up for. I want to thank staff for their presentation. One of the things you may not have noticed because of the other screen, many people were taking pictures of the slides. So if you could release the slides, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was, exemptions. I've got 40 years as a practicing architect on the east side here. Exemptions can be really great, and they could dog you forever. Some are codified, those are usually better, and some are left to the discretion of the staff, which can be great, depending on the staff. I don't know your current staff, I've known some of the past staff. I would give those mixed reviews. So be careful on that. Having served on the Planning Commission for many years, I noticed you almost got into a discussion with staff tonight about a couple things. And if you feel like you really need to be more discussive and less formal, I'd suggest some kind of workshop right in the middle, right here. It can be very helpful, and it gives staff an easy opportunity to present a whole lot of alternatives. It can be a good tool. When you're looking at other jurisdictions, be sure that you're looking at jurisdictions that might not be as restrictive as some of them. Others can be very restrictive. So you got to be a little careful which, it's kind of like choosing best science and kind of which one. Slides available. Thank you for your service. Small areas that are defined as critical areas. Having worked a lot in the industry, if you get the area too small, oftentimes, quite oftentimes, the buffer actually ends up being far, far greater than the area that you're concerned with. So I'd be a little cautious about that when you're looking at smaller critical areas. Thank you for your time. I wish you great wisdom and skill and luck.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Brian. I live at 8009 118 Court Southeast. Not very good at public speaking here, but I think that the biggest distinction for me is getting grandfathered, or I don't remember the other term, but grandfathered versus exemptions, right? So I think that's a very, very critical distinction, and grandfathered would be desired for certainly us and our neighborhood. The other key factor here is that if that buffer is instituted, that cuts into a majority of the lot, and we would be worried about our current tax base. So those are the 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jan Drange, Lake Bourne again, but this doesn't relate to my particular piece of property. Well, my piece of property is 60 feet wide. If you build a buffer of 100 feet, yeah, right? So when you were talking 3,000 feet or 35,000 or whatever, I think you also have to take into consideration the dimensions of the lots. Because lots of them are longer and wider, or just not even both.
Thank you.
Robert Henry. I live on a 5-acre parcel in the very southeast corner of the city. We have salmon-bearing stream on the southeast corner. I'm not too worried about that. However, we do have a wetland on the property. So I'm kind of curious as to how you determine if a particular wetland, a particular water flow is a result of somebody digging a ditch 40 years ago, or whether it was there before any of the trees were cut down and was turned into a field. I'm also concerned about how you distinguish between a lawn versus a field versus a pasture and versus a meadow, for example. Those are all sort of synonyms if you look up synonyms for lawn, but they have different use primarily in terms of agricultural use. So we have animals that graze on our property, and so I want to know how that may impact the decision for typing the water and determining what the setbacks are supposed to be. Let's see, I have a lot of comments here to myself, which I'll try and clarify later. I'm also concerned that some of the rules that you're considering here will be different than what's required or suggested by the May Creek Basin Plan. May Creek Basin Plan sets an upward bound on, sets a maximum amount you can clear on the property. It's actually quite a small fraction, so you can clear maybe, don't quote me, 15 to 18%. But the numbers you're tossing around today seem to imply you could clear much more than that. So you make sure you don't forget about the May Creek Basin Plan that was enacted, well, that was suggested to be enacted about 20, 25 years ago. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question or a comment? Okay, we'll close the comment period and give staff an opportunity to address those questions.
I think most of these were comments. And some of these we just need to take with us, like the distinction between grandfathering and exemptions, the dimensions on the lot. Darcy, I don't know if you were able to hear Mr. Henry's questions about determining if a wetland is more man-made or result of man-made action or not. And then there was also the distinguish between lawn, meadow, or other similar types of areas, and how you, as a scientist, look at that.
Right. Well, hi, Robert. I was thinking that it might be helpful at some point If you wanted to talk specifically about your property, you could come in and speak with me or a planner. But I'm happy to answer some questions generally. So basically, a wetland that's been in existence, no matter how it formed, if it's been in existence for even 10 years, there's no specific number, but certainly 40 years is going to be looked at as a wetland that needs to be regulated now. The Corps of Engineers, who regulate wetlands on the federal level, they basically call almost nothing an artificial wetland right now. Not my decision. I'm always surprised, but they, even if, like, I feel I've given proof that this wasn't a wetland 5 or 10 years ago, it was created by some construction. They're still regulating it now as the waters of the U.S. Some things have changed in the Corps recently, but in general, they really protect everything because it's a wetland now. It's been a wetland for a while. It has wetland functions. So I would say one that's been around for 40 years, we would also look at it that way, that it is a regulated wetland. Regarding lawn versus pasture versus field, we don't define those in our code, but I mean, if you're asking about future development on your parcel, whatever is happening there now can continue. Basically, that's a very general statement, but if you have animals out there and you don't have a long period, say more than 5 years, where you're not grazing or you're not farming, then you may continue that. Now, if you go to put a house in that area, that's a different use. And so we would apply the normal wetland and stream regulations and buffers because that use is changing potentially. And thank you very much for the reminder on the May Creek Basin Plan. I would suggest that we may want to consider mentioning that in the code, but we'll discuss that with staff and then the commissioners. I hope I answered your questions, but again, you can call Aaron, you can let him know. If he wants, we can talk in more detail about his project or property.
Okay. Thank you, Darcy. I also
Thanks, everyone.
Let's move on to zoning map update.
Katie, are you going to stick around? I might need your help, Tyler, with the presentation for zoning map if Katie is going to take off. We just have 1 minute while we get changed.
Director Fitzgibbons?
Yes, sir.
A quick question. Mr. Henry brought up the May Creek Basin set of rules or whatever it is. As far as the city of Newcastle goes, do we have to enter into some sort of an interjurisdictional arrangement to make sure that, we're not stepping on somebody's toes? Or I'm curious how that works.
I need to read this plan. I only heard about it recently. Of course, it predates my time here. So I would need to get back to you on that answer, if I may. Thank you, Tyler. Okay, so update on the zoning map, if you want to go ahead and go to the first slide. I'm just going to go piece by piece. I know Commissioner Cack wasn't here last time. We showed a map and it's keyed. And these were different, proposed areas for changes, potential changes to the zoning map. They're not required. But if we'll just go ahead and start with number 1. Next slide, please. So number 1's a big nope. The reason being, if we can go to the next slide, I sat down with Director Braun to talk about access and whatnot, and we were looking through historic aerials and noticed that indeed this property was at one time developed. So you can see the yellow arrow to the house in the middle there, or the structures in the middle there, and even where the storm ponds are now, there were structures at one time. So this property could, I mean, it's multiple properties, but it could be potentially subdivided and sold off. Because of the topography and the way that, in the location, it would be likely beneficial to retain the R12 zoning because it's close to downtown, it's right off a major street, so you could get more dwelling units in there, rather than just a single family home, which might be less desirable. Or a duplex, I suppose. The access that is there, is that dotted line on the screen, is still viable. So obviously, this is a 100,000 foot view from above, and the city would need to do more research, but we have some interest in selling off pieces of real estate potentially, and this could possibly be a viable one. So our recommendation, staff's recommendation, is to actually retain the zoning as R12 here.
Is that access from Cold Creek going up? Is that how we should read that?
It looks like it is, and I know it's steep slope from the top, so we would at least need to go walk it.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. Director Bronze didn't seem to have a concern about a potential access off Cold Creek.
There's a raised sidewalk on that side of Cold Creek. So it looks like the access would have to tear through a sidewalk that is
Create a driveway.
already 15 feet above road grade.
Is it 15? Is it that high above road grade there? Okay, then it'd likely have to come from the top.
Yeah.
So we'll look into that, but anyway. Next slide, please. Number 2 is the Highlands zoning. I haven't heard, which is surprising, I haven't heard back from the HOA president. If anybody has friends in the Highlands, please let me know. I do have a few contacts from the Greencastle meeting. We had a lot of Highlands folks there, so I have some email addresses. But all in all, and I spoke with the city attorney today about this too, it doesn't seem like it's, staff haven't been able to consider any detriment to providing them with zoning to which their houses were actually built. And it would just ensure that if we made other codes in the future, it would be commensurate with their development. So it seems like moving forward with rezoning the Highlands is not a risky move from the city's liability standpoint or anything.
I would really like to have the city, make sure they reach the HOA president and make sure and ask the HOA president to send a notice to their mailing list.
Yeah, I would like for him to get back to me too.
Yeah, and I wouldn't make a change until we made that contact.
Number 3, I have written that down. Number 3 is the May Valley Road properties. We've only heard back from 2 folks, one of whom, oh, sorry, next slide, Tyler. I'm not used to having to say that. One of the folks outright said, and I think I forwarded his email, not interested in changing. The other one just wanted additional information. But those are the only 2 folks that we've heard from, so. Staff don't necessarily recommend pursuing this without an interest from the area. So, next, this is Dashwood at May Creek, and I spoke with the city attorney on all of these today. Again, this was This was actually built to even smaller than R4 standards and having them retain an R1 standard. Also doesn't do justice to the R1 requirements when you look at the zoning description of R1. This is definitely not an R1 zone. So the staff's recommendation is to move forward with the rezone of this so that the lots across, so it would be just to the left of the number 4, those, I think it's 6 parcels or 7 parcels, would get the R4 zoning. Because that's their closest designation. Next slide. The Altera neighborhood, staff are very neutral on this one because they've already developed where it's the dark yellow color under the number 5. That's where it was developed. They developed to R6 standards. It was a standard subdivision. In the brighter yellow, the lighter yellow portion, that's where the critical areas tracks are. Those are non-building areas. They're not going to have setbacks or impervious surface coverage. Those won't affect those lots. But it would create some consistency across the whole subdivision to show that it was developed to R6 standards. But if commissioners feel that because those are critical areas on the eastern side, I think that's a perfectly good argument to retain the R1, or if commissioners feel like the R6 should permeate the whole subdivision, I think that's also logical. Do you want, yeah. Oh, sorry, I thought you were just gonna circle it.
I thought you wanted to see like an aerial of where this thing was. Yeah, it's north of the Highlands.
Can you turn on your mic?
It's next to the elementary school, kind of, or behind the elementary school.
Yeah, you can see it here.
So commissioners, are you happy with there being no change here?
Leave it.
Leave it.
Okay. We haven't heard back from the Porter Jensen Jewelers yet. I'm going to also try to reach out to them again. Obviously, we wouldn't rezone this lot because it would have consequences for what they could build there. The building is 100 years old. It's kind of charming. It's a use we don't really have here, so it's unique. I would hope that we could get a response back, but if not, it's one parcel. That's what happens. So, do commissioners have questions or thoughts on this one?
Commissioner Blocker?
I don't actually have a question about this property, but across the street, the gas station, what's it changing to? Something's going on right now.
Oh, they're just doing a tenant improvement. They're just fixing the inside of it, updating it. Tyler, did you review that one? Do you know what's happening?
They're not going to a mini mart store or something like that. It looked kind of like that.
I think they may have been expanding the retail inside a little bit at the expense of, I think that may have been an auto repair use in the other part of the building. They're not going to expand the building at all. I want to say that they'll be expanding the retail in there, but only a little bit. But that it's really just an interior renovation.
Yeah, so it's already has the neighborhood business designation, so they could expand it if they wanted to, in theory.
No, I'm not sure what you said about where we leave this one. I mean, what,
I would like to try one more time to get in touch with the property owner, just because I haven't heard anything back. And if they did have a dream of continuing its current use, this would be very beneficial to them to go through this process with us. But
and if you don't hear anything from them?
Staff would not recommend changing the zoning unless commissioners all felt confident in that.
Okay. So we'll wait and see.
Is there any consideration zoning-wise, suppose they apply for like historic monument status or something like that, does that have any ramifications as far as how it's zoned?
Not the zoning, that affects this, assuming it's for the structure, it would just affect the reuse of the structure potentially.
For these two parties that we've tried to reach but haven't heard from, did you say that email is the way you've reached out to them?
That's how I reached out and actually had conversations with the HOA president previously. Like I have presentations and they kind of just stopped and I haven't heard back. And then, and unfortunately they don't have a website. I was hoping they might have like a general contact. But the owner of Porter Jensen Jewelry, well, that site, it appears to me they're selling their primary dwelling where the tax bill goes to. I don't know if anyone actually lives or receives mail there, and I just did everything through USPS for them. I don't have an email.
And there's no phone numbers for either of those?
No, not. The only data I have access to is the assessors. I suppose I could go knock on a door.
And the HOA president, do you have any phone number for him?
Who?
The HOA president?
I don't. I don't think so. But we do have contact information for other people in the HOA, so I just might start being a little annoying. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Next slide. We had a comment during the comprehensive plan about this property, that in 2005 it had been rezoned to limited open space. That's true, and then in 2017 when they adopted the zoning map for the downtown strategic plan, they repealed all previous zoning maps and they implemented the map that had this as R24 again. So it was zoned back to R24 in 2017. There are no additional steps we need to take. At the last meeting, I did want to let you know that I followed up with Director Bronze about the infrastructure at the site. And there's actually a portion of the land that could potentially be subdivided and sold off. It may be a good use for affordable housing. It's already an allowed use. It's right down there in the, right across from Lake Warren. It could be a really good location. So that's something that the city can look into further as well.
Does the city own this lot? Oh, they do, okay.
And there's enough utility access. You can kind of see it, but not too well because I drew kind of a rough polygon there. But on the southern side, like, because I know there's a trail that goes around it, but I think we could keep the trail access through there. I don't think that would get interrupted by selling off a portion of the lot.
So what would be the process for exploring rededicating that property to affordable housing?
We would probably hire a survey civil engineering firm to look at the potential use. They would understand the stormwater drawings that we have. They're called as-built. They would look at those. We would look at title.
Would we need to have the city council involved before any of this happened?
We should have direction from them. There should be direction from them to spend the money on at least from finance committee to get the study done. But I think it'd be good to have their direction overall.
And does the planning commission have a role in putting this in front of the city council?
I mean, absolutely. We could do it in a report, if on one of your reports, if you like, or when this goes to city council, we could definitely, like what you did with middle housing and you kind of gave a report beforehand, you could say, and during the process, we discovered.
That makes sense. In other words, when we present any zoning changes to them, we would cover this at the same time.
Right. Next slide.
Commissioner Blocker.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this particular property. Would there be a process that could lead towards Habitat for Humanity getting something like that and doing their process there?
Maybe. We would, and that's actually something we could talk with Arch about even, I mean, we wouldn't even have to have, I don't think we'd have to have council's blessing on that. We could talk more openly with, or generally with Arch to kind of see what they think.
Seems like that'd be a good fit there.
Commissioner Lowe.
So, what about those house property owners, residents who live there? Do they get a say in this process? Meaning, if we are saying we are proposing to put this as affordable housing, are we also going to get their input?
It's an outright allowed use. So it would be just a co-compliant use for the area. And this would be moderate income. This would be workforce housing is what we would be looking at. The subdivision itself would go through the same process that a private property owner, so we would have to notice it to properties within 500 feet. Did I get that right? Is it still 500? It's 500, not 300. Yes, 500 feet of the property line. I'm feeling rusty, but yeah. So, separate zoning for golf course and city parks open space. We talked about this. We said, yes, let's do this. In the code, I don't know, I'll admit that I kind of ran out of time a little bit. I don't know, did commissioners get to look at the proposed changes in the text for the descriptions of the different, no? Why don't we do that next time? I'll send them out again. Maybe I'll that'll give me a little time to review it. But if we can just talk about it next time, we can even talk about this now, but what do we want to call it? So staff suggestion was for the golf course was recreation open space. We looked at doing public open space for cities, but POS is a acronym we're going to try to avoid.
Wasn't just me.
Yeah, nope. Yep, city open space is what we came up with, COS, for the remainder for Lake Bourne and all the other city properties that fall into this category. So one, I'll need thumbs up, thumbs down. We could retain limited open space for one of those. I hadn't even thought about that. I was just like, they need new names. But we could keep limited open space for one of them. And if we did that, would we leave that for the golf course, for the private uses? Or would we do that for the city's spaces?
How about city open space for the city spaces and leave limited open space for the rest?
Right.
What do you think, commissioners? Okay.
Thank you. And then we'll look at the descriptions next time.
One other thing, I think Gary Campen from the Trails, he had a comment about maybe carving out a small section for a future trail. And I don't know the legality of that or what's possible there, but I just wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. This would not be the process for doing that. If we just zoned it for the city, they could come after us for a taking, but we would have to go through and negotiate with them the sale before we change the zoning.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Would commissioners, now, if we're going to have a quorum next time, we could do the public hearing on the zoning map next time and only have one public hearing on the 24th? Yeah, okay. Let's do the public hearing on the zoning map in August, assuming, I know Chair Gadzik will be out. We're going to talk about the calendar anyway, so I'll let you move on to that, but if we're done with this. Okay. Planning calendar. We were talking about canceling the next meeting, but I think we're going to have a quorum. Vice Chair Troutman will be here. Commissioner Kack? Commissioner Lowe, will you be here next time?
Yeah, what's the date?
August, yeah.
Wednesday, the 27th.
Okay,
Yeah, I should be here.
okay. So we should have 4. We could hold a public hearing and give an update on the critical areas. That would be probably good. Keep that moving. Okay. And then if we still are itching to cancel a meeting this year, we need to figure out what to do with November and December's meetings. Those are both, November's is the day before Thanksgiving, and December's is Christmas Eve. I know this is kind of a out of the blue question, but any preferences on those?
Feel free to comment, commissioners.
Not Christmas Eve.
Not unless Aaron's going to be Santa Claus.
That'd be fun.
From a workload standpoint, Director, are we behind the 8 ball, or are we pretty well caught up? I mean, can we afford to move these things around or discount them?
Yes, I'm very comfortable with, unless something happens with critical areas where it gets pushed all the way from from September to November. We have September and October to wrap up critical areas. We were going to start on small cell wireless next and downtown standards, but I think we're okay. So if we want to take a month off or.
Well, we don't really have to decide tonight, right? We can take it month by month.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we can pretty much decide we're not going to meet on Christmas Eve, but, the alternative there might be meeting earlier in December.
Right,
Yep.
exactly. So,
Mr. Blocker?
I know I'm a little behind the curve here, but I'd like to request that staff actually investigate, as Director suggested she might, about those 2 properties that are city-owned, about the feasibility of both of those being made or turned into a process that Habitat for Humanity might be able to build on, both the wedge by Coal Creek as well as around the pond. I think those would be good for the affordable housing as well as other issues.
may I clarify, Commissioner Blocker, if you are specific to Habitat for Humanity because of the program that they run? Is that a specific interest, or are you thinking any more of the moderate income housing types?
I was thinking specifically because of their program,
Okay, cool. Just making sure.
where owner is involved in the construction and ownership process and developing process.
If you had a conversation with Arch about those 2 properties, could Arch give information that might lead to Habitat for Humanity as one of these uses? I'm thinking maybe Arch will look more broadly at those properties than if Habitat might be one of the options that we could use, but they would also give us other options.
Correct. Yeah, I think so.
That be okay? Yeah.
It's okay with me, certainly, because it would reach affordable housing or go toward the goals. But I particularly like Habitat for Humanity because the people who are going to get the home have to participated in building it, and that means they have an interest in maintaining it and so on.
Okay, great. I think that's all of my questions for calendaring.
All right, that completes our agenda, so we will adjourn.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.